Welcome to the Network Plus Prepcast, your dedicated audio companion for mastering every objective on the CompTIA Network Plus certification exam. This series is produced by baremetalcyber.com. In episode 129, we focus on the essential practices used to reinforce the security of network devices and sensitive data. Hardening is the process of systematically reducing vulnerabilities by removing unnecessary features, enforcing strict access controls, and applying protective policies. Without hardening, even properly configured systems may be left exposed to preventable threats. For Network Plus candidates, understanding these hardening techniques is vital for protecting both infrastructure and information, and for answering exam questions focused on configuration, access, and policy enforcement. Security hardening plays a vital role in reducing risk. In enterprise environments where a single compromised device can become an entry point for larger attacks, hardening policies are a standard operating practice. Whether it's enforcing complex passwords, restricting access to configuration files, or preventing unauthorized data transfers, these steps form the foundation of network defense. In this episode, we explore three categories of hardening: password policies, data loss prevention, and access controls for network devices. These topics appear frequently on the certification exam in both terminology and practical, scenario-based format. In the context of networking, hardening involves disabling unused services, removing default settings, and applying secure configurations across devices. It means stripping away anything not essential to operation while locking down what remains. Hardening is not a one-time task. It's a continuous process that adapts to changing threats and systems. It also requires consistency. Applying security settings uniformly across devices ensures that weak points are not left behind. On the exam, you'll need to identify hardening actions and recognize the difference between secure and insecure configurations. Password policies are a core part of hardening. Strong policies typically require a minimum password length, often 8 to 12 characters, along with a mix of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. Passwords should expire periodically, and reuse of previous passwords should be restricted. In addition, failed login attempts should trigger lockouts or alerts to prevent brute force attacks. These practices reduce the chances of credential compromise. On the exam, expect questions about password complexity requirements and lockout settings as part of user authentication hardening. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, adds an extra layer of protection beyond traditional passwords. It requires users to present something they know, like a password, along with something they have, like a smartphone app or hardware token, or something they are, like a biometric scan. This method greatly reduces the risk of unauthorized access, especially if credentials are stolen or leaked. MFA is widely recommended and often required in secure environments. On the exam, you should understand how MFA contributes to hardening and where it should be implemented. Data loss prevention, or DLP, refers to systems and policies designed to detect and block the unauthorized movement of sensitive data. DLP tools can monitor email, file transfers, USB activity, and even clipboard use to ensure that protected data doesn't leave the network unintentionally or deliberately. These tools are often configured to flag or block certain keywords, file types, or destination domains. DLP is especially important in environments subject to data privacy regulations. On the exam, expect to identify DLP as a key component of data protection. Controlling who can access network devices is another critical hardening measure. Role-based access ensures that only authorized users can view or change configurations. Administrators are given higher privileges, while standard users have read-only or limited access. Unused accounts should be disabled or deleted to prevent abuse. Even administrative accounts should be reviewed regularly for necessity and activity. The certification exam may ask how access rights contribute to hardening and how roles are used to enforce least privilege. Securing management interfaces is one of the most overlooked but critical areas of hardening. Devices should never be managed over unsecured protocols like Telnet or HTTP. Instead, secure alternatives like SSH and HTTPS should be used. In many cases, management access should be restricted to specific IP ranges or allowed only through a virtual private network. This reduces the attack surface and ensures that only trusted endpoints can reach the management plane. In the exam, you may be asked to choose the correct method for securing device administration. Configuration backups are important, but they must be protected to prevent misuse. These files contain sensitive information, such as credentials, interface configurations, and routing logic, that could be exploited if leaked. Hardening means encrypting stored configuration files, limiting who can download or restore them, and tracking changes through version control systems. The ability to restore a secure backup is essential during disaster recovery. Expect the exam to ask about backup protection, storage locations, and the risks of exposed configuration data. Tracking access and configuration changes is part of any robust hardening policy. Logs should record who accessed the device, what changes were made, when they occurred, and whether they succeeded. These records help detect unauthorized activity, identify root causes of issues, and support audits. Many organizations feed these logs into security information and event management, or SIEM, systems for analysis and alerting. On the exam, you may be asked to evaluate log entries or explain the benefits of configuration change tracking. Another key hardening task is disabling unused services and closing unneeded ports. Every open port or enabled feature expands the attack surface. Services like FTP, Telnet, or SNMP version 1 may be running by default, but are no longer secure by today's standards. Hardening includes scanning devices to find unnecessary services and turning them off, ensuring that only essential functionality is exposed. The exam may include scenarios where disabling services is the correct security response to a given vulnerability. For more cyber content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Patch management is a crucial component of hardening. It involves applying updates to device firmware, operating systems, and software to fix known vulnerabilities. Without regular patching, systems remain exposed to attacks that could have been prevented. Patch schedules should be documented and prioritized based on risk. Critical updates are applied quickly, while lower-risk patches may be bundled into maintenance cycles. Documenting each update helps track changes and supports rollback if issues arise. On the exam, you may be asked how patching contributes to hardening or how to prioritize patch schedules across networked systems. Physical access is often overlooked in network security, but it's a critical layer of protection. If an attacker can physically reach network devices, they can bypass software protections, reset configurations, or insert rogue hardware. Hardening requires locking server rooms and wiring closets, restricting the use of USB devices, and monitoring access with badges or cameras. Physical barriers are the first line of defense in layered security. The exam may present scenarios involving physical risks and ask what security measures should be in place to limit access. Security hardening is a heavily tested domain in the certification exam. You should recognize key policies that define password length, complexity, rotation, and lockout rules. You'll also need to understand how to secure services and ports, manage administrator credentials, and control device access. DLP concepts, especially around blocking data movement, are frequently tested in relation to email security and endpoint protection. Expect exam questions to ask how these elements work together to reduce exposure and improve operational security. Secure remote administration practices are essential for managing devices that aren't located on premises. Using a virtual private network, or VPN, ensures that communication is encrypted end-to-end. Remote sessions should also be time-based or approved for specific maintenance windows. Additionally, active sessions should be monitored for unusual behavior or terminated after periods of inactivity. These precautions reduce the risk of unauthorized access and ensure accountability. The exam may ask how to securely manage a router or switch that resides off-site or in the cloud. Security policies themselves form the framework that guides all hardening efforts. They define acceptable behaviors, required protections, and the consequences of non-compliance. For example, a password policy defines the requirements that SOPs and system settings must enforce. Security policies also provide the structure for audits and incident response. Without clearly defined policies, enforcement becomes inconsistent. On the exam, you may be asked to distinguish between policies and technical controls and to explain how each influences daily operations. Device deployment is another opportunity to apply hardening techniques. Before new equipment is placed into production, it should be configured using baseline templates that include secure settings. Default accounts and passwords must be removed or changed. Services that aren't required should be disabled immediately. After configuration, the device should be tested in a staging environment to ensure security and performance. On the exam, you may see questions asking which steps should be completed before introducing a new firewall switch or access point into the network. Password management systems are used to securely store and manage administrator credentials. These systems encrypt stored credentials, allow for controlled access, and often include auditing features to track who accessed which credentials and when. Many enterprise platforms support automated password rotation and integration with role-based access systems. Using these tools improves security while reducing the risk of forgotten or weak passwords. On the exam, expect questions about secure credential storage, admin access policies, and how password managers support operational hardening. To summarize, hardening practices involve removing vulnerabilities, enforcing strong access controls, and monitoring device changes. By limiting what systems are exposed to, configuring devices securely, and tracking all activity, administrators reduce the risk of compromise. Password policies, DLP controls, and device-level security measures all contribute to a resilient network. For the Network Plus exam, you should be ready to identify hardening actions, compare password and port configurations, and explain how each element of hardening strengthens security. To conclude episode 129, hardening is what turns a working system into a secure one. By locking down configurations, enforcing strict access policies, and continuously applying updates and monitoring, you create a network environment that resists threats and supports compliance. These practices are more than recommendations. They are daily responsibilities in any enterprise network. On the certification exam, expect to see hardening woven into questions about configuration, monitoring, and policy. And in real-world operations, these principles are your first line of defense. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Network Plus Prepcast, your trusted audio guide to the CompTIA Network Plus certification. This episode was produced by baremetalcyber.com. For more cybersecurity podcasts, books, and resources, visit baremetalcyber.com. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal Cybersecurity Plus podcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com. And before you take the test, make sure to check out the practice questions in the book Achieve CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701 Exam Success by Dr. Jason Edwards. They cover every domain and are a powerful way to lock in your knowledge.